Congratulations to all the judges as well, including the dinosaurs section. As they've done a great job continuing to be supers. I invite up the first thing of the affirmative team to begin the debate.
Litigation is ruinously expensive to undergo. Attorneys' fees often run to the hundreds of thousands of dollars for relatively straightforward cases that only took 6 months to reach a judgment. That means that the idea that you could end up in a court and be forced to defend yourself is terrifying for most people. It's something they don't want to undergo, and even when there's provisions that allow you to cover attorney's fees, often they don't allow you to cover the full amount. Often they're just unavailable whatsoever, and often they only apply in the most extreme circumstances and don't apply in the average case. What that means is for the average citizen, the prospect of having to undergo litigation is something that you desperately want to avoid. Why is that harmful when we talk about the torture of defamation and when we talk about rich and influential people with powerful public voices? That's harmful because those are the people with the most incentives to weaponize that process against anyone that might come forward against them. So if you want to come forward and accuse a politician of sexual harassment, they're the ones that are most likely to immediately threaten you with a lawsuit, so you're never willing to do so. Why is that? Firstly, they've got a massive interest in keeping their story out of the public sphere whatsoever. So they barely want to act quickly and promptly, and that means immediate threats of litigation against you. Secondly, they've got the financial resources to access that system and to threaten you with that. But they've also got the knowledge of how the system works in a way that you probably don't, because there's very often a power asymmetry between the types of people that politicians sue, which is either other politicians, in which case that's just like nonsense, or more realistically, it's like poor citizens that are trying to whistleblow on something that politician has done, or whistleblow on an affair that they've like been committing that they want to keep out of the press. That means that people are unwilling to come forward with accurate stories. The first thing to know is that creates a social harm. It means that there are powerful industries that are rife with corruption that prey on people. So that looks like a Me Too movement, right? Where the media industry is shot through with corrupt people that keep their younger staffers in line as they would abuse them through threats of litigation and through threats of defamation, right? And more importantly, they're able to individually target those people in a way that means that they're disempowered and that it looks like the system is on their side. So somebody who's wanting to come forward, somebody who's wanting to expose a predator, feels isolated, feels alone, it feels like they won't get a fair voice in the system because they don't understand how it works, and this very rich and powerful person is telling them that they do and that it's on their side, which is very credible and very realistic, given that it tends to be. What that means is there's that social harm, but there's also that direct individual harm, right? Because the system is weaponized against the poorest, they're the most likely of going into litigation. And that means the most vulnerable in society are the ones that suffer when the rich and the powerful are able to weaponize this against them, right? Because most people don't understand the intricacies of law. Most people can't access cheap and affordable legal advice to tell them whether or not the case will be good. Most people will just assume that the system is rigged against them, because it very often is, and that they wouldn't win a defamation lawsuit, and that all they'll ever get from coming forward and trying to expose someone is they'll be dragged through the mud in court, never get their time in the limelight, and never possibly expose the deep, deep rock that is in politics and that is in the media industry. But also note that these powerful people are the ones that least need this. Why is that? What defamation is a claim that you have been damaged, and that damage is that your reputation in society is not what it used to be because of what someone has said or what someone has done. Why does that not really matter for these people? So influential media figureheads, if you are the anchor of a show on CNN, or if you're a politician, are the ones with the loudest voice in the media already. They're the ones that are always going to get the chance to tell their side of the story, insofar as they have a side of the story to tell, right? So that means when someone comes forward with an uncredible allegation that probably doesn't damage them, because people just see it as someone who's got an action line against them. So that's why, for instance, when some fantasists of the UK made up a story about there being like this like child sex orgy on a yacht inside the Tory party, they didn't really get ignored. They didn't really get much traction in the media because everyone saw that as a factual story that wasn't realistic and credible. But moreover, it also means that these people are the ones that are going to get their defences aired through society. So insofar as they've been damaged, they've already got a path to undo that damage already. They've already got a way to make sure that their reputation in society and their side of the story is going to be heard because they're already in the media or have extremely close links with it. So they don't actually need this talk for those types of people. It doesn't apply because it's not the path they should go through to undo that damage. What that means is that not only is this talk incredibly damaging to people trying to come forward and expose these people, trying to expose when there is corruption, when there is sexual harassment within the industry, trying to out people as predators that people should not feel safe working under and that should be turned out of those industries, as we saw in the Me Too movement in the media. But these types of people never needed it in the first instance, right? Paula Bennett and Winston Peters don't actually need to sue each other for defamation, right? They just write passe op-eds in each other on the post, and that's the method that they get for getting their side of the story told. So it's totally unnecessary for the types of damages that are meant to compensate for these types of people. It is completely ludicrous to instead pretend that they don't really have a platform, that they're not getting heard, and that the damage on the society isn't just part of normal discourse, but is somehow uniquely damaging to them in a way that it is to a regular person that doesn't get media interviews and that doesn't want media contacts and doesn't already work in their industry. So this tool is totally unnecessary for these people and incredibly damaging to those who find whistleblowing on corruption and sexual harassment, and that's why we oppose it.
Thank you very much for your speech, and now have the first speaker from Side Negative to say. There is only one issue in this debate. The next 6 minutes should leave you in no doubt that politicians and media people have an interest in protecting themselves from malicious lies like everyone else, and that the system can preserve people's freedom of speech and ability to access those remedies. I will prove two things to you in this speech. Firstly, that the threats to speech have been overblown by the opposition and entirely hinge on a mischaracterization of politicians and media figures as people with extraordinary wealth and power, rather than the reporter who loses their job when a rumor that they have HIV spreads in a country like South Africa. And then secondly, I'll tell you that these people have a key and crucial interest both in their own careers, their own sense of dignity, and that of their families in making sure that people cannot get away with lies about them. Let's turn to that first point, threat to speech. And the first thing I want to address here is that misunderstanding of exactly who we are preventing from having these types of remedies. And the first layer that I would note here is that the litigation will only ever become truly expensive at the point where there is an arguable claim. We think that courts are very good at throwing out vexatious defamation claims very quickly, and while of course people can threaten defamation, these people also have heaps of other remedies that they can use to get someone to be quiet. So who are the people who are likely to sue? The first thing that I would question from their case is just the assumption that rich people, if we accept their characterization, shouldn't have access to the courts. There will always be an imbalance of power when we look at civil law from people who are wealthy and people who aren't wealthy. But why is it not fair on their side of the house to assume that the people in the motions are always people who are wealthy? Because firstly, politicians very often aren't rich, especially the ones for whom a single rumor in a single well-placed media world can entirely ruin their career.
These are local politicians, these are members of the Green Party and other small parties. These are not people who do have millions of dollars in the bank, and so it's unclear why we should adjust the things against them. But secondly, people in the media have an interest and often aren't helping themselves. This is not just about Sean Hannity, who we should note needed like many cases against him to stock up before his media company ever took action. These are the people most protected from rumors actually having an impact on their reputation. The people who do have the most to lose from malicious rumors are people much lower in the organizations. And these are people without enormous armies of lawyers. They aren't people who are able to simply mobilize huge things against them. And most of the time, who they are suing are people who have power over them, who have been able to use that power to spread a malicious lie that people believe that has cost them in some dear way. Equally, there are parts of the system that allow for people to access civil law. You have people acting pro bono, you have settlements within the legal case that allow you to give a part of your settlement in response to legal fees. So it's unclear why in these argument cases you should deny them the right and the ability to sue. But the second question then is who gets sued? Because they wanted to say this is about major companies or major individuals going against your random person on the street who is lied about. No, one of the key parts of defamation is you need to be able to disseminate that voice in an incredibly influential way. That means the vast majority of people who get sued are enormous media companies who have entire legal teams and strategies designed to protect them from defamation and most ensure a fair case between these individuals. As soon as you accept that the bland mischaracterization from Otago falls out of the debate when you see the real people who sue and get sued, they're left on the back foot. But equally, there are 4 things that are important about defamation law that rebalance this. Firstly, you have a defense of truth. You can just say a right thing about someone like Roger Ailes, and you can be defended in court from that. Even if they want to pursue you vexatiously, which brings you to the next protection against vexatious suits. If you are aggressively pursuing someone consistently, the court will punish you for that. You have honest belief. You have qualified privilege for the media, which means that the only cases that get through are the ones that are the least justifiable. Equally, what is important here is that if you decide to remove defamation, you play into a narrative that fake news is allowed to be done in any world. So if the Donald Trumps know that they can just say, I've been completely denied my access to a fair day in court, that deeply buys into the narrative he wants to tell about a media that has no ability to make sure that it's telling the truth. It is in the interests of free speech to have a gatekeeper, to have a guardian of the truth that tells you when someone is lying and tells you when someone isn't. Because speech is currently protected, but they render that freedom of speech hollow when people no longer think that it is meaningfully gatekept. But the second important thing within this debate is just to say that politicians and media people have an interest like every other human being in the dignity that comes from someone not lying to you. And I just want to characterize what some of these lies are. If you are in South Africa, and someone starts to lie that you have HIV, that changes your life. That is a rumor that you can never escape and will hound you forever. And you deserve the ability to be able to sue someone within an inch of their life for sharing that slander about you. If you are a female politician or a female media representative, your life can be ripped to pieces by someone choosing to use their truth, so to use a misrepresentation of the truth to bring you down a peg. These are people who lose their ability to preserve that interest and to preserve their dignity. But equally, media people and politicians have the most to lose from reputational damages. They are the people whose entire lives get disrupted when these lies are spread. They lose their jobs, they lose their public platforms, and they should be able to be compensated for that. Nevertheless, the people who are caught in the crossfires. Because when you spread a malicious lie, that means your people's children get bullied. That means that people have no right to gatekeep the truth because it doesn't exist anymore because the courts no longer have a right in setting that record straight. They have a lot of quibbles with civil law in this case. They think it is unequal, they think it is unfair. But being able to sue for the dignity of the truth and being able to make sure that your harms are compensated is something that should extend if you work in the media.
And now about the second sector of the defamation committed by.
is qualified belief, right? No one, by a 5th or 6th year law student, I assume, but also most normal people have no idea what those legal technicalities in defamation law are, or how they would apply to their specific scenario, right? So it's all very well for me to get up and be like, well, these specific aspects of tort law will just protect this person, so there's absolutely no problem here, because you don't know that, right? If you're someone who already distrusts the system, you probably think that there's absolutely no protection for you there anyway. Moreover, how on earth do you find out without access to a law degree at university level education? The issue in this debate is that most people don't have access to that, don't have the funds to access someone who has had an education, and they are just frightened, right? The problem here is not, does the law protect you properly, but do you believe when you're asking, you should go and tell a reporter about the trauma that has happened to you, or the pervasive corruption you've seen in the government department, do you feel you're very protected? A few things in this speech. The chilling effect, the most important material we brought you, a characterization of who we're talking to, and finally a discussion about what protections you do have as this type of person. Right, let's look at the chilling effect. It's worth noting here that the impact if we can win this material are substantial. Like dealing with corruption and the government matters, dealing with pervasive cultures of sexual harassment that ruin industries with participation of everyone but the most powerful is a massive impact if we can win that in this debate. Now, the material here is based on my introduction, but let's expand on that. It is the cost that you perceive coming towards you from having to go through litigation whatsoever. No, most people probably even don't recognize what litigation is, right? Even that term is inaccessible to the ordinary person. We've already elevated this debate far beyond what most people would understand by using terms like litigation or attorneys or what protections exist under the law. So let's look at the actual costs that you perceive to the ordinary person here. Firstly, financial. Again, just mitigatory attacks on the edges from me here when they say, oh, actually you expect it to go through court in these particular scenarios if these particular protections don't exist. If you're a low-income person, even just a middle-income person, the idea that you're just at some risk, but not full risk, of hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of legal fees is not sufficient for you to take that risk in the vast majority of circumstances. If you have a family, or if you just, don't want to be woke for the rest of your life, right? So even if they say that financial cost only accrues in some instances if certain thresholds are met, that means nothing to the ordinary person and there's no guarantee for protection with them. And when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, which are nothing to a politician, it is everything to an ordinary person. So it is still very high risk for you. But moreover, insofar as they stand up and they say, here are the ways in which tort law protects you, these people do not recognize where the story they want to tell would or would not fit into that scenario, right? Because as I said in my introduction, most people don't have a law degree, and you all in this room are a minority in society. I'm a science student, I've got no idea what's going on in that. So people don't recognize those scenarios even when they exist, right? But also, in the majority of cases, right, if you look at the kinds of impacts when we're trying to win a debate, when you're trying to deal with the chilling effect, so someone is trying to point to corruption that might exist in government departments, or you feel there's a systemic culture of sexual harassment that's locking women out of media or locking women out of government, you probably already distrust and fear those institutions, right? So even if Nick stands up and tells you that there's no financial cost and everyone understands the law, the kind of people who are trying to whistleblow on corruption or sexual harassment in society's top echelons, those people will still fear reporting when this can be victimized against them either way. So the impact here is actually right. It's like the Me Too movement having its growth significantly rolled back, such that we're not able to peel away that ugly facade that is covering up the things that are locking women out of large aspects of society. Like not being able to deal with corruption because people are afraid of approaching the media or telling their story and doing so. No, you can put a blog post, right? You're terrified to publish that blog post. You're terrified to go and talk to the reporter such that your story literally never gets aired. That's how the chilling effect works, because you're frightened. When you go to publish it, they immediately contact you, they threaten you with the lawsuit, and you immediately retract that post before it gets reported on and before widespread media can deal with the issue of corruption or the issue of sexual harassment. Right, so let's look at who here, because basically they stand stand up and they say there's all these harm to these people. So let's do a recapitalisation, having proved that our impacts are substantial and we've one of those. First of all, they try to squirrel this debate by saying like, oh, it's just literally everyone, right? Emotional prominence of people who matter, right? It's not like a local reporter who writes blog posts part-time. It's about prominent people who have access to funds and resources. So people who know who you are, right? But even if it's not financial, right, you're always at a power imbalance because if you're a prominent media person, right, that whoever's whistleblowing perceives you as having that finance, and perceives you as having that resource, even if they can stand up and say that that person actually does not. The ordinary person perceives that that exists, right? So the poor person feels threatened, or like the complainant feels threatened, even if there isn't an imbalance of resources, they probably expect that there is. Given this is probably someone who already distrusts powerful media figures if they're trying to whistleblow on like sexual assault in that industry, right? So you don't approach the reporter, or the reporting approach is unwilling to take the risk. What does that mean, right? If they do so on our side of the house, the kinds of people we're talking about have the resources to act, right? Because the law gives them this weapon that just frightens most people. It's not that it gives them reasonable legal remedy, it's just even the possibility that they could take you to court allows them to completely clamp down any claim whatsoever from most ordinary people, right? But insofar as that claim is published, these are prominent people. They know how the media work, they might be running the media. They have the funds to have an op-ed that got to tell their side of the story. These people don't need the protection of the law. By attempting to apply something that's meant to protect ordinary people to the most powerful, they just weaponize it. Don't give them that possibility.
Thank you, speaker, for their speech. And now about the second speaker for the final second section.
What did side Otago have to prove to win this debate? They needed to prove two things. First of all, they needed to prove that politicians didn't deserve the right to protect their reputation. Often in times, politicians and media personalities actually rely on their reputation for most of their income and most of their livelihood. In fact, they deserve more protection than the ordinary person. Secondly, they needed to prove that given this right exists, it's a right we all accept that everyone should have, whether the social interest overcomes that right and overcomes that interest. So those are going to be my 2 points of clash for you today. Firstly, in terms of whether these politicians deserve this right to protection or not, they were woefully unresponsive when they came up and talked to us about that, because their only responses came from, oh, there's a social harm, we need to remove that social harm. But I think it goes beyond this, right? We've showed you why these individuals undergo the same kind of reputational harm, if not more reputational harm and more cost to their reputational harm, when they are defaming against, right? But also specifically, we told you why this is external outcomes, right? This impacts a lot of other people in the world. For example, if a politician in a specific party is being defamed against, that looks bad on the entire party. So it's a very effective political tool then to attack those people. And look what Fox News does now with abandon. Imagine how much more they're going to do that when they don't have the fear of getting defamation lawsuits. But furthermore, we told you why in terms of individual people, that often has very, very harmful impacts on their family, right? And Daniel told you all this with no response. This looks like, for example, if there's like a sexual scandal or a certain person and they aren't able then to go to the media, get an apology or get a retraction or an injunction to stop the harm happening in the first place, that harm impacts the entire family, right? Their spouse, for example, is going to be very embarrassed and able to, handle life on a daily basis. Their children might be bullied in school. All those harms accrue to not that person only. And it's very hard to stop those harms from happening because it's harms from the public, and then there will be no ability then, especially as a prominent figure, to stop that harm from accruing, except for this defamation lawsuit. So, for example, there you have a lot of harm to a lot of people, but also we think that this is not specifically meant to be only for those prominent, very prominent political figures. These prominent figures like politicians and media personalities. So we think that the element in their side is to include a lot of people who don't have the same recourse to that system. But finally, they rest all their assumptions on like whether this individual is able to have other avenues of recourse, on just a hunch that they're able to do that just because they've got money. No, they haven't proven that in the most likely cases, every single prominent politician or media figure is able to overcome that kind of those lies that are being told in the media and not accrue those harms, right? So the very basis of why politicians shouldn't deserve this protection is very flimsy. We think the best kind of protection should be given to every single person in society. These people are people too in society that deserve that protection. Finally, then, have they proven to us, because that was all that we said in many response to that. Finally, are there any actual social costs that come from this? Their main point here was that as a chilling effect, when you have this risk of litigation, no one is going to come forward and whistleblow. That didn't respond to what Daniel told you about how actual whistleblowers act in society. So first of all, they will probably, think about, okay, I found evidence of corruption, I found evidence of something going wrong in society, I need to tell people about this, right? So they're likely then to seek legal help. On our side, we find providing legal aid, we find providing that community legal service that actually exists. So they can actually go talk to people who know what qualified privilege is and figure out whether they can get that kind of benefit or whether they can actually talk about this or not. But also just go talk to large media companies, right? You don't get these random whistleblowers who are so careless and they just post it on Twitter, for example. They go and speak like the Washington Post or the New York Times. Those individuals have all the money and the legal team and legal knowledge, but also they have the time, it's their job to expose this, and they don't mind going to legal court battles because they have the protection, but also want that exposure. So in terms of whistleblowing at the highest level to get all the benefits of fighting corruption, that is already accounted for in society, and there are methods and avenues for individuals to go through. This means that you get that kind of benefit. But let's go and talk about what Grace wanted to talk about. The very few individuals who somehow want to whistleblow by themselves without taking legal advice, and about the perception of that litigation. This debate is about a balance, right? So even to the extent that a few individuals on the lower levels are able to or are less likely to do a whistleblower, we think in general whistleblowers are the types of people who are willing to take the personal cost because they're not going to get fired from wherever they work, for example. But we also think that those kinds of people are likely to take other avenues. What is the cost on their side? We agree that freedom of speech is a pretty touchy matter. It requires that balance. So we think on our side, the status quo has achieved that balance, right? Where we allow individuals to protect their reputation and say this is a lie and prove that in court, get a retraction or get an apology. But the very fact of going to court is often a very good way of proving to the public that you are innocent, right? On their side, however, you don't have that recourse. So what instead you have are people like Fox, companies like Fox News and Tucker Carlson just being able to do anything they want, right? Look what they did to Clinton, look what they're doing right now with Democratic candidates. Without the legal recourse of defamation, they can just go full ham on that, right? So that means all that harm is completely exaggerated on their side. So before we move on to that actual harm in terms of freedom of speech and people actually engaging in the world, look at the numbers here, right? The very few whistleblowers that are going to be deterred compared to the ever-increasing number of tabloids and fake news that people read these days, and the lack of protection there. Imagine what happens when you remove the defamation. Every tabloid is going to start having conspiracy theories because that's how they get views, and that harm is going to be compounded on those politicians. Finally, in terms of freedom of speech in general, right? This is again a more general harm and benefit of some whistleblowers coming up in society, is that you can't know as a person in this era of fake news what is real and what is not. The courts and the system are one way that people trust that this goes through in terms of news companies and the accountability they have. The moment you inundate the field with several fake news about politicians and about media personalities, no one's going to know the truth and not able to make proper decisions. That's again a failure of the media and a failure of the freedom of speech side to side debate.
Thank you for your speech. We now first seek order, and I invite the leader of the negative team to speak.
This debate happens in two arenas. First is the individuals with no legal experience and very little power being picked on by enormously powerful media figures, and I'll explain to you why they do not get changed for the truth. And then I'll explain to you why in the far larger arena of powerful people trying to destroy each other, why it's incredibly important for the systemic integrity of knowing that you can have at least some relationship to the truth, and that people who are the victim of malicious lies can get justice for themselves and their families. We should make sure that you still have these protections in society. Let's turn to that first group of individuals with no legal experience simply being told. I want to note here that at first instances, this is just an incredibly small number of cases, because in order to be sued for defamation, your claim needs to create a damage for that person. They need to show how your statement has harmed them in deep ways. And then importantly, they need to hang their entire case on the fact that cost alone stops you from getting the type of legal advice you need, the type of legal advice that explains to you what you need to say, who have lawyers who understand defamation law and can explain it to you. Importantly, as soon as you take into account the fact that there are mechanisms like pro bono lawyers, mechanisms like settlement sharing agreements with lawyers, it suddenly becomes far easier for an individual whistleblower to change the dynamic by which they engage in defamation law, because they are protected by the truth or by what they're saying from being sued by it. But equally, the fact that they want to premise their case on people with almost no legal experience, and then to say the solution is a legal change that these people also probably won't understand, doesn't make sense. Because when the rich people come and says, I will sue you for defamation, it doesn't matter that legislation has changed and that you can now no longer sue the small carve-out of individuals in an incredibly complex legal system. The chilling effect still exists. So insofar as they want a legal change for the sole group of people for whom the law fails, means that confidence is made. Let's turn to the second, much larger one. Who gets sued? Firstly, enormous media companies like Richard Murdoch are constrained by the fact they cannot maliciously lie about individuals, and they're forced to things like illusions. You take away all those constraints, the amount of vitriol that'll come about at every small politician without the recourse to address them will be enormous. But also importantly, when you don't have defamation, how do the rich people that they want the whistleblowers to address protect themselves? They're just like, that person is lying, and now the feminists have gotten rid of our ability to find the truth. In no world are their whistleblowers effective if there's no mechanism or systemic understanding that the truth can be found and the truth can be determined. And the people who do sue are people whose livelihoods are entirely dependent on reputation, and who are in a public arena where other influential and powerful people want to destroy you so they can have your power. These are people who are prominent without being rich, like almost all politicians, like most journalists who have powerful voices on public issues. They wanted to say that they were on the side of the weak, without understanding they're part of a much bigger power structure. Prominence doesn't deny you legal rights.
For the final speech, the semi-final one, I invite back up the leader of the Affirming team.
These were never the types of people that ever needed to enter the court to recover their reputation. And that's what they never engaged with, and that's why their case failed. Two issues. Who gets locked out? Who we benefit? Who gets locked out? They had characterization for avoidance, so like maybe the local reporter's prominent. A, we reject that, but also B, our mechanism doesn't rely on money, right? It relies on prominence, which is gained via media context. So all prominent people will always have contacts and things with the media because that is why they are prominent. You literally cannot be prominent without having an intimate relationship with the media and without having those connections. That is how prominence occurs. So given that, our mechanism that you are always going to have those contacts and always going to get your side of the story told functions, right? Because as much as Fox News wants to trash Clinton, right? The response is that Clinton just goes on CNN, gives an interview, and then wins the popular vote, because that's how society decides what truth is, right? Because she's got that voice and she can be heard, and that doesn't actually hurt her, because these people always have that other avenue. You never needed to bring the court into it to decide what truth was. Society could do that itself without needing that legal avenue, given the unique harms that occurred when you try to cram it into a legal context. So the thing is, they just don't have a heart at the end of this debate, because those people can always recover, because that's how society and that's how reputation works when you've got those contexts and when you've got that ability. What did we show as a harm? What we show is that when you have the law in this area at all, it is recognized as a threat against you, right? Because the well-off person is just going to tell you, if you go and talk to a reporter, that is defamation, and I will sue you and ruin your life for it, right? So when Jimmy Spell molested you as a child, and you're like, should I go and talk to a reporter and expose him? He's like, I will literally destroy your life and leave you homeless, because the law is on my side, and he's this incredibly influential person that you listen to, and that has a significant amount of gravitas, right? So then what do they do with their work? They go to community law. Community law is like a Nathaniel Brown, how you have He is not equipped to deal with defamation. He's got an army of white suit lawyers telling you that the law is against you and that you will lose and that your life will be ruined, right? It is a joke to say that that's the sort of access that people have, right? They will lie to you, they will tell you that your life will be ruined, you are very likely to believe that. The solution is to remove the law from this context. I would say that that is not the way we are going to decide the truth of this, and we are not going to allow people to recognize the strength holding against you, simply because we're not going to put it in the context where you can lose hundreds of thousands of dollars simply for speaking up and simply for speaking out. But even if this was a trade-off, we were always caring about the most vulnerable in society, right? Oh no, politicians might be nasty to each other. If that means you can more easily expose sexual assault, we will take that harm and we will win the debate on it, because I do not care if Paula Barrett and Winston Peters are a bit more sad and a bit nastier to each other at the end of this debate, if it means we're more able to speak out on sexual assault. It's endemic in the legal industry and endemic in politics. If that's the trade-off we have to make, we will make it and we will win on it.
Very well. And now I ask you all to leave the room.
Oscar! We have Lecture Theatre 1. You can use that.
I reckon Charles should have just looked back.
Thank you. Oh yeah, I actually